such a broad topic. I was actually having this conversation the other day with somebody around homosexuality, which is often what people associate it with. But the idea of how we identify ourselves and how we label ourselves can be very fraught, and is often, I think, a really not a good approach to take to our lives. Just putting a label on someone, I think it doesn't change who they are. Even a single experience doesn't necessarily change who somebody is. So I think sexuality is incredibly complex. And
is it more about who we are, or is it defined perhaps by the activities that we do? Is it who we are or what we do, Dave?
Very good question. I would say it's both, and I think a lot of people probably single it down to what we do, but I would say sexuality influences us on so many levels, not even just a physical one, but the way we relate to others and the way we see the world, and our relationship between friends and colleagues and God, and inherently sexuality influences everything. I'm very passionate about giving people healthy messages about sex, and one of the things I always say is, a lot of people enter marriage or enter sex thinking that the goal is orgasm. Sex is about this goal of orgasm. But I would say sex is actually far more than that. It's about being intimate and being known and feeling safe and vulnerable. And that is so much more than just a release of, chemicals in the brain or whatever.
There's an image of the Christian community and, Christians and sexuality, at best restrictive and prudish, at worst judgmental and even hypocritical. Do you think that's a valid?
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's a lovely feeling to think that I'm right and everybody else is wrong, and it's my goal to sort of tell them the error of their ways. I think that's a very human response, and particularly when it comes to religion, again, that is a temptation, is to have that feeling like I'm right and everyone needs to learn from me. And with sex and sexuality, it's so private, it's so taboo, that I think a lot of Christians probably don't engage in the discussion well enough. They don't actually stop and see it from someone else's perspective. They stand on their own, which is a real shame, I think.
The way in which we behave sexually, or the way in which we are sexually, does that impact the rest of society, or is that just a personal thing? Is that just my stuff?
I think it influences so much of life, and I'm always passionate about getting to young people, especially young boys, and saying to them, the way that you have been exposed to sex, the way you express yourself sexually, particularly with pornography and things like that, it has huge implications for the way you relate to other people, particularly women. I mean, if you are so used to seeing women in a sexual manner and bringing yourself to sort of sexual arousal by using these images, these women, for your own needs, then I don't think it's easy to start to look at women differently, in the real world. And even marriage doesn't change those habits that we get into at a young age.
Some people see Christians as being very judgmental in terms of, this is healthy sexuality and everybody else has got the wrong idea in that regard. And particularly pointing the finger at people that make certain lifestyle choices. These people are wrong and we've got everything together. It's not as simple as that, is it? It
really isn't. And once you dig a little bit under the surface, you realise even in the church there is the same issues throughout society, in the church or outside of the church, young and old, experienced and unexperienced. And so my prevailing message is, before you jump to judging someone for their choices, enter their world, listen to them, understand where they're coming from and some of the struggles that they live with on a daily basis. And then once you've listened, then maybe you might have the opportunity to speak into it. But until you've really listened, I don't think you really have the right to tell someone what you think is right or wrong, or make it a moral judgment on their life or their lifestyle.
For some people, the way in which they express their sexuality is flamboyant, and it's out there and it's for everyone to see. But for others, you can have a dysfunctional sexuality behind closed doors that you never talk about, that is as much in need of shining a light on it and saying, well, actually, I need to sort out this aspect of my life. Yeah,
and you can be so hurtful with sex and sexuality if you don't treat it carefully. And so I would encourage anyone who's struggling to seek help. It's not one of those things you want to jump on the rooftop and sort of announce it on Facebook that you're struggling. But if you are struggling in a relationship, or in general, seek help, seek good, counsel, and I would advise a counsellor, and really allow someone to speak into your relationship, into your life, to shine light onto some of those dark areas, some maybe guilt or shame or fears that you have, or anxieties. Allow someone to shine a bit of light on that and work through it, and with hard work and with good counsel, I think you can bring healing to broken sexuality.
How would you define healthy sexuality or a healthy sexual relationship?
It's a great question. I would say the ability to be honest with your partner and to feel comfortable and safe in their arms and their hands. I think that's healthy. I think when there's no pretend agreements, when there's no anxiety or resentment building. And so inherently sex comes down to communication. And it's a cliche, but it really is the truth. If you know how to communicate well and love that person and listen to them and enter their world, then you'll be a good lover. And if you're not good at that, you can't expect to learn certain techniques, or because of certain aspects of your body, you'll be good in bed. It actually really comes down to the heart, to the mind, and the way that you respect someone and how comfortable they feel.
Mm-hmm. Is there a spiritual dimension to sexuality? I mean, the spiritual aspect of life and the sexual aspect, do they overlap significantly?
I think it very much overlap. I think every aspect of our life overlaps. And so, yeah, again, if you're right with God, then the fruits of the Spirit will come out in the way you relate to someone. I love the idea that 1 Corinthians 13 is not just a chapter about love, it's also a chapter about sex. Sex that's kind, sex that doesn't envy. And if you actually read that scripture from that perspective, I think that's a lovely picture of what God intended for two couples in a sexual embrace.
I mean, that's an aspect of the Bible that isn't often preached on, that the Bible does have a lot to say about sexuality and positive sexual relationships.
Yeah, very much so. And so if you start to look at verses in that light, I think you'll find it has a huge amount of wisdom and insight to offer a couple who are sexual together. Again, because it's more than just the physical side. It's about the heart and the soul and the mind. Yeah.